Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel, Scientology, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing, Janis?
I'm doing good, Mark. G'day, everybody. Hope everyone is good. And we're back with John McLean again. We've had a series with John, and it's been fun chatting to him about the Apollo days and days afterwards and different things that we experienced while we were in Scientology in the Sea Org. So we're going to continue doing that.
And then I just want to mention to our viewers, we're actually going to, Janis and I are going to do a live. You may see this, months later, but like anybody who watches this here in the next day or so, we're going to be doing a live on Thursday and another one on Saturday, where we will answer viewer questions and things like that. So you guys can look forward to that. As a matter of fact, the one we're doing on Saturday is going to be with Scott and Carrie Campbell, who are the former Free Winds staff members who were locked up and detained, and you're going to be able to ask them questions about the abuses that they endured and also their life today. So that's coming up here. I just wanted to mention that before we get going.
Yeah, so make sure you watch that series so you know their life story in the Sea Org and after they left and went back again, so that you know what to ask questions for.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, without further ado, we will bring back our guest is John McLean. He was a former Sea Org member who was on the flagship Apollo as a teenager. He left. This is in the late 60s, early 70s, and his family had gotten into Scientology in Toronto, Canada. And his mother, Nan McLean, is a famous whistleblower and person who spoke out against Scientology years ago. As I said, John then left the Sea Org and joined her, and then he also began speaking out because of the harassment that Scientology couldn't help themselves from doing, because that's the way they do things in the Guardian's office and in Scientology. And then they ended up all over television, and they got sued 15 different times by Scientology. And so John is here to tell the third part of his story here. And we're really glad to have him here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce again, John McLean.
Hi guys,
Hey,
thanks
John.
to be back. Yes, it's been kind of fun recollecting some of the things, and quite disturbing for me to remember some of the bad things, of course.
I'll bet.
So,
Right.
I mean, so many people that have gotten out of Scientology. Mine was, decades ago, but they suffer from PTSD, and rightfully so. So, we have to understand where they're coming from when they do speak out about Scientology. It's horrible for them personally. So
yeah, and like you said, John, we were talking off air beforehand. I mean, they still do the same thing today that they did back in the 70s, and actually earlier than that, to people who speak out and who start, trying to talk about the abuses that happened and all that. They have the same tricks. They're just under a different name. Back then it was the Guardian's office. Now it's the Office of Special Affairs, and they hadn't changed because they're basically following L. Ron Hubbard's policies, which, according to keeping Scientology working, are sacrosanct, and you cannot question them, right?
absolutely, yep, absolutely. So, with that said, you were asking about what happened with the testimony at the IRS hearings in LA that we went to. They were again appealing the fact, they being Scientology, of course, were appealing the fact that they should have tax exempt status at the time.
Now, remind people when this was. Around what year was this?
This would have been 75, 76. So we were asked to go because of the information that I had with respect to, not just me, but others had the same information with respect to the amount of money that was coming to Hubbard directly and the ship directly and the Church of Scientology worldwide, which then shipped their money to the ship in a lot of cases. And it was vast amounts of money. And the IRS was at that point in time trying to make sure that Scientology did not gain tax exempt status. As a result of that hearing, There were a whole bunch of witnesses.
Yeah, and then let me just add in one thing, because the IRS correctly, knew that Scientology was basically funneling money to L. Ron Hubbard, and he had been for years. And that basically their theory was, the IRS, was that Scientology was just a front for L. Ron Hubbard, and that it was basically a way for him to make money and not pay taxes. And their criminal investigation division was actually investigating for years. Anyway, go ahead.
I think you're right. I don't think you're right. I know you're right. Having been there, it's like, okay, the money that came directly to him, the money that went to the Swiss and Janis, was it Belgian?
Luxembourg.
Thank you. Bank accounts was huge. And, at one point, back and forth from the ship, Janis, I guess from a mission back in LA, brought a huge amount of cash as a young person. And wow, when I found that out, it was like, whoa, why would they put you in that position, Janis?
Well, here, you know what? I was actually coming back from leave. I'd been on a leave of absence. And Terry had been with me, but she had to stay in Phoenix at the dentist. Dad had us go to the dentist while we were there. And she had to stay longer. And so I was going to come back on my own. And then they said, they pulled me in at the relay office in LA and said, hey, we need you to courier money back for us. And to do that, you need to be briefed as a missionaire. And I'm thinking, oh, I can make extra money and get a bonus for doing a courier mission. And I'm not thinking this is as illegal as hell. I'm thinking I'll get $150 bonus.
And how old were you then?
Huge in Scientology that we only got $6 a week.
How old were you then, Janis?
I was 17 years old, and I was going to travel from LA to New York to Lisbon. So they gave me the money, and I'm keeping it in my coat, and sleeping in my coat on the airplane. I think it was around $75,000. That's what's always stuck in my head.
Wow.
And anyway, so when I got to New York, in these days, anyone can walk up to the airplane, there was no TSA security.
Right.
And so they walked me to the plane, made sure I got on board. When I arrived in New York, I was met by the relay office in New York and walked from one plane to the next to make sure I got on there. And then when I arrived in Lisbon, I was met at the plane when it arrived, and which was okay with me because usually Terry and I traveled together. So this was my first time at 17 years old traveling back by myself. That was actually my second international flight, because Terry and I had flown from Lisbon, Madrid to LA together, and now I was flying back by myself. So, but I didn't think of the danger of if I was caught with all this money. I just thought, I'm going to get a bonus.
That is so scary when I think about it now for myself, because the most I ever brought, I think I mentioned last time, was about $40,000. But remember, in the packages you're bringing are all those negotiables that then were transferred into the bank accounts in Switzerland, Luxembourg, wherever. So, there was a lot of money.
And like Janis, like you said, they didn't X-ray bags. They didn't do any kind of checking, as long as you just got checked. But we thought about it. It's like, could you imagine putting, that amount of money on your grandmother or, a 17-year-old today and trying to get through security and take it through? I mean, if they got caught, they would have been stopped and held and possibly, thrown in jail, and that's that they were endangering you without you even knowing it, and that's a form of abuse. That's we just realized this just talking about it since your last interview we did with you, John. That's just another way of hitting it. And Janis, it actually goes with the fact that, like John mentioned, that you alone were left when Hubbard hightailed it out of Morocco after the coup for you guys to basically clean things up. But if the Moroccan government had decided to come in and arrest you all, you would have been thrown in jail.
I know, and I hadn't even really looked at that until we had that conversation, and someone commented on it in the comments section that, yeah, we were left holding the bag. And at that time, I was 16 years old,
Yeah,
and
and just to say this to our viewers, okay? We call our channel Peeling the Onion for a reason because we're still peeling the onion, okay? These
exactly.
stories, some of these stories that we hear, they're the first time we've ever heard them and they happened years ago. And then it makes you go like, well, wait a second. Oh yeah, that shouldn't have been that way, or oh yeah, that might have been illegal and all that. That's why we call our channel Peeling the Onion, because these stories that we hear and that we try and tell, they help people to realize what it is they were involved in or not involved in, and hopefully bring some clarity.
Well, go on, John.
Well, I just have to point out, though, that the majority of adherents to the Church of Scientology never knew a damn thing about what we were doing, about what was happening at the higher levels. So we can't lump them in with any kind of knowledge of criminal activities, I guess, which they were. But, using a 16 or a 17-year-old to do that is absolutely abhorrent.
Right,
Yeah,
and it's
and it
my
is.
ignorance of the world.
Yeah, but you were born in Scientology and were in the Sea Org for a very young age. But
Yeah,
also, what you say, John, is correct. Scientology operates on need to know basis. Everything is compartmentalized. Even though I got all the way to the top working for David Miscavige when he was running Scientology, Hubbard was still alive and hiding. I had no idea where he was. I didn't know what Miscavige was talking to Marty Rathbun about regarding legal things or anything like that. My whole responsibilities was getting films made and setting up sound production lines at the Gold Base in Gillman Hot Springs. I mean, that was basically it. And I could observe what Miscavige was up to and all that, and his dealing with staff, but I didn't know anything about the legal stuff that was going on. He kept that
right.
purposely to only a few people. And I'm sure it
It
was the
was
same way in the Guardian's office and other places too, right?
it was all a needs to know, and that's even with the messengers. Though we were with Hubbard, 24 hours a day outside his cabin or at the end of the hall or outside his office. His dinner time, he sat with Mary Sue, and every time a messenger came in, the conversation would stop. So we didn't know what those conversations were. Again, it's a need to know basis. But, going back to when we were in Tangier and we had to flee, after we had fled, and I still, until only when we started talking about that, I still hadn't really connected the danger we were in. It didn't really hit me, even though I knew that one of the Moroccans who had worked for us doing public relations was arrested after we left. And he was actually put in jail and had no way of communicating to anyone to say, this is where I am, until a fellow jailmate got released and went and found his uncle, who was a colonel. And then Colonel Allen was able to get Lady released from jail, but no one knew he was there. And that could have been us.
Right.
Yes.
And you don't look at it at that point. You just, okay, great, we're out, we're done, new country, let's move on.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that these are all the crazy thoughts and programs that Hubbard himself wrote for us to follow. And
yes,
if you recall the orders of the day of February 20th, 1971, he again commented about the fact that we own quite a bit of property around the world, and we will be gaining more countries as well. And that was his intimation of the control that he intended and partially got initially in Morocco.
Right.
Like that was his goal. Then similarly, what happened when Scientology had to get out because the whistle was blown by myself and a whole bunch of other people, Scientology came to Clearwater, and eventually a bunch of us blew the whistle there.
Exactly. Exactly. We did the same thing moving into Clearwater. We weren't Scientologists.
No.
We were United Churches.
Right.
And it was all written and all planned. In respect of, what was the name of the operation to take over Clearwater? I'm trying to remember it now, and I'll have to think about it. I will remember
Okay.
it for sure.
Well, let's get back, John. Let's get back, John, to you guys going and being interviewed by the IRS
Right.
in 1975, 76. That was in Los Angeles, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Do you remember what it was like, or what happened?
Well, we were not physically touched, but certainly accosted on the way into the courtroom, because Scientology was aware that both my mother and myself were going to be going into the courtroom. And, we were intimidated, of course, but we were all sworn in properly and just testified what we knew. And what we knew was this vast amount of money going to Hubbard, generated around the world, and the fact that, he had these spheres of influence that he wanted to create. Didn't mean anything to the IRS at the time, though. And all they cared about was the money. And the result was, again, that their request for tax exempt status at that point in time was denied. So we had also, as I recall, presented to the Canadian Revenue Canada about Scientology as well, giving them certain information already, but they never had exempt status in Canada. So that was good. So we
and just so the viewers know, the fight to get tax exemption went on for years, because I'm sure they appealed that ruling, and that eventually led to in 1992 or whatever it was, where they finally did get their tax exempt status after suing the IRS individual agents and people. And Scientology is the only well, at least as far as I know, they're the only people that have ever sued the IRS into submission, where they ended up getting what they wanted, which was tax exempt status, paid a fine, and then and now we're stuck with the fact that they are quote unquote a church because the IRS says they are, and that was from years of fighting the Internal Revenue Service. And in the 1970s, they said, no, we're not giving you a tax exempt status. It wasn't until years later that even occurred.
Yes, but if they were denied that now, and I think that's the biggest push now, is to work towards getting Scientology off that designation.
Right.
And if they're off that, they're as an organization, they'll totally fail.
Exactly. And the only way that's going to happen is if somebody in the Internal Revenue Service or the U.S. government and the Department of Justice decides to really take a look at the abuses and what is happening with the money that is raised by Scientology, in terms of they're not following the charitable, requirements that they're supposed to do. They're using that money to punish and to abuse people and to attack people and lots of other things, right? And that if somebody would in the IRS and the government would actually make a stand, they could make that happen. But the fact of the matter is that it's difficult now, because there's now almost 30 years of precedent, actually over 30 years of precedent, that they've had tax exempt status. So it's going to take a lot to do that.
But we have to remember that as part of their modus operandi, the Church of Scientology infiltrated every organization, every government organization in United States, the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, at various levels. And, as Scientology always does, it gathers the dirt.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so,
and that enabled them to file all the different lawsuits against the various individuals within the IRS or those different three-lettered organizations.
Yes. And they even paid off judges, which is a matter
Yes.
of reality in the raids that was verified. So
right now, that was the other thing I was going to mention, Don. I forgot to mention this when we talked before we started today. I actually read about the Operation Snow White, which was the largest infiltration in the United States government by the Guardian's Office, which led to the raids in 1977. I read about it up on Wikipedia, the history, and then I also looked at the charging document, the sentencing document that the government proposed to the judge to get them sentenced. And basically, they did a plea deal, and a bunch of them, Mary Sue included, went to jail and had to pay. But when you read it, you go like, God, they got off with, they only had to go for like 4 years, and they had to pay a $10,000 fine. It wasn't like, nowadays you go like, well, that's nothing, But they basically pleaded it down to one charge of obstruction. They were obstructing, an investigation or whatever, the IRS, or into this whole thing about stealing documents from the government. Although there were lots of other felonies they were responsible for, and then that's how they got it done. They never went to trial.
Mark, they stole Xerox paper.
Yeah, that's what they told us.
Oh my goodness! But they stole documents. I mean, this wasn't just exclusive to Canada or United States. In the United States, it was huge. In Canada, they also infiltrated every organization they could. The RCMP, our local police in our area, Canadian Mental Health Association to obtain documents. I mean, these guys were criminals.
Absolutely.
And they ended and broke the law in every possible way they could to get information and to work that information against the people that were arguing that they were a horrible organization, which they are.
And then the Scientologist staff member who got caught, Michael Meisner, who got caught by an FBI agent and arrested, and then he basically was, escaped or whatever. Then they hid him. The Guardian's Office actually physically took him, moved him out of Washington, D.C., and then hid him. And actually, when he tried to escape a couple of times, actually physically bound him, tied him up, would not let him go because they were trying to keep him away from testifying before a grand jury against Mary Sue, Henning Helt, L. Ron Hubbard, etc. And so they actively were obstructing justice. And this is all laid out in that charging document, which is pretty amazing. And of course, we've heard that story too about the people grabbing him. And he eventually escaped and went to the FBI. And then he did testify. He was put in witness protection. And and that's how the raid happened, is because they finally got him, and then they raided the places, and then it went from there. As a matter of fact, Tony Ortega did a whole article on Michael Meisner, because he's no longer alive. But he went on, after this whole went on, he became like he worked at a nuclear power plant as a nuclear engineer or something up in the mid northeast, up in, I think, New Hampshire or something like that. Anyway.
I met Michael Meisner once when I was on mission in Washington, D.C. in April 75. I had to coordinate something with the Guardian's Office, so I went there and knocked on the door, and he is the one that actually opened the door and let me in. And it's funny, I used to always wonder, what's so confidential back here? Why, I'm a Commodore's messenger. I'm with Hubbard. I know everything that's going on. But they were like so hush-hush. And I'm like, I just couldn't fathom why they were so hush-hush. And even a messenger couldn't see what was going on behind those closed doors. And then it was only when the raid happened and you start hearing bits and pieces, you suddenly go, oh my God, this was going on. We had no clue about it.
Yeah.
Hubbard always explained Snow White as, well, there's this false information.
Right.
There's these false information about him in the files, and the Guardian's office job was to collect that information and get it corrected and get the correct information put into those files. Okay, that's all innocent. But so it was like after the raid, it's like, what?
But remember, even long before all of that, Hubbard wrote policies about attack the attacker.
Right.
Use the law to harass. All of those things. And of course, with the infiltration of many areas, like, again, our lawyer's office in Toronto was broken into. The two people, Coulson and Chornopesky, were arrested, found guilty, and went out on probation. But they also stole from our lawyer in Clearwater a huge number of documents that were crucial to our case. And they've done that not only just then, but they're still doing it now. I mean, it's a policy that was written then and still.
Now I wanted to mention, we talked about this, I watched a video interview that your mother, Nan McLean, did. Not an interview, but it was like a video she did for the senator down in Australia, Nick Xenophon, when Scientology was being investigated in, I think, 2008, 2009, in that time period. And she did a whole, hour-long video, and I watched about 20 minutes of it. But you mentioned in our last video that those Snow White documents that the government, got in the raids, they became public. You could see them, like, it was open to the public for a short period of time in Washington. And your mother actually went to Washington, and the only reason we have them is because she copied a bunch of them, right? And she legally copied them, right?
She legally copied them, and her good friend Paulette Cooper was also there at the same time. And they honestly realized, oh my God, what have we got here? And they realized that they had to disseminate them really quickly, or they might lose the ability to show the truth. And, they both worked hard together. They were great friends. But
I'm actually going to put a link in the description of this video for any of our viewers that want to watch the videotape that your mother did, for Senator Xenophon. I'm going to put a link to it. It's a YouTube video in our description. So if you want to watch that afterwards, I highly recommend it. I mean, your mother was definitely a crusader and a very powerful voice against Scientology. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, about those documents, she mentioned the fact that one of the documents they got was a Guardian's order, which was kind of like a policy letter, like a flag order for the Sea Org, but it was for the Guardian's office. And it was called TRL. Now, in Scientology communications courses, there are training routines, and the abbreviation is TR, training routines, for communicating, for talking and acknowledging people and all that. Well, TRL meant training routine lying, okay? And it was a whole document about how you did this drill if you were in the Guardian's office or if you were going to be testifying before somebody, where you were taught how to properly lie and believe that what you were saying was the truth. I'd never heard of this before. I knew that they did it because Mike Rinder and other people have said, oh yeah, these people, they lied all the time. But I mean, your mother actually talked about this document, and I was again peeling the onion. It was a revelation to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't a course that was sold in the academy.
No.
No, but again, Mother was a true hero in that she amassed an absolutely huge amount of original documents from the church. And in the old house, the whole basement area had 10 file cabinets.
Wow.
Every book, that the HCOPLs, HCOBs, and every anti-Scientology book that you could find. And she actually gave those away to anybody that was interested in getting them. But her goal was to reveal the truth, not to make scapegoats of people who were in Scientology, because she cared that they were real people and that they had, they had their right to self-determination. And she also counseled people in helping get out of Scientology, but she always did it very gently with the approval of the person being counseled and whoever the parents were or whomever. Not like Ted Patrick, who she got involved with at one point in the same case. And
we need to tell John, people don't know who Ted Patrick
is.
Excuse
me. Ted Patrick was a very, very famous deprogrammer.
Right.
Yes. And
he kidnapped people. He actually they would actually kidnap people and then take them to a remote location to quote unquote deprogram them.
He was just a deprogrammer of Scientologists or other cults as well. Just Scientologists.
Just Scientology, as far as I know.
And so
he did other cults too. He did Moonies. He did other things too.
Oh,
okay. So a parent would go to him and say, "My son is brainwashed and he's in Scientology. I want to get him out." And so Ted Patrick would come along and just kidnap him and take him to the parents. Is that how it worked?
Not personally, but he would have his people working for him go. And
he got paid. That was his business. He got paid.
Right.
Yeah.
By the families.
He got paid lots of money to do that.
And the reason I say this, your mother wasn't paid and didn't do it that way. And, Hannah Eltringham is another one who's done this as well. Yes. But, we were taught to be afraid of Ted Patrick. We knew of him when we were in the Sea Org.
Yes.
Because it was promoted that they're kidnapping people and taking them away. And so we were warned against somebody like Ted Patrick.
Yeah. Well, and rightfully so, to be honest. Yeah. Mother ended up testifying in court against Ted Patrick, and that really got a few people of the ex-Scientology crowd a little ticked off with her. And at the time, I think even Paulette, who was her great friend, said, "Nan, why did you do that? I mean, he's only trying to do what's good for, the people." But she really felt strongly that you don't strong arm anybody into getting out, because it really doesn't work.
Yeah, and being kidnapped is scary. It's
it's illegal. It violates your civil rights. You have every right to do that. They should be taken to jail.
True. So, flipping back to harassment, by the way, even back in Toronto, they were trying to create about, they charged me with a criminal offense against Fred Harris at the time.
Oh,
sorry, not Fred. Brian Levman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, who was the GO department. And, they charged me with harassment. Of course, that was a load of crap. And I had to physically go into court. I wasn't fingerprinted, but it was pretty close. And not so far off than, poor Paulette Cooper, who was just horribly framed and nailed in a criminal investigation. Mine was light in comparison to that, but we got to court, bang, it was thrown out, and he was warned, cut out the Scientology crap. Anyway, I diverged and I shouldn't have. So let's go back.
John,
how about
where is Brian Levman today?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. I wanted to ask you though, John. Okay, now you testified like in front of the IRS, right, in California, but then eventually you testified in Clearwater, right? So I wanted to talk about that too.
Well, Mom testified at the Clearwater hearings. Both Mom and I came down early when the church in 75. I believe the Clearwater hearings were in 77, if I'm not mistaken. We came down to blow the whistle on the fact that these guys are going to take over your community. And that was at the behest of Gabe Cazares.
Who was the mayor, the Clearwater mayor, who was found out about it and became public enemy number one by Scientology in Clearwater. But anyway, go ahead.
So he asked us to come down, and he set up a public meeting for us to let the community really know what was happening. And because of our knowledge of how they operated in taking over or trying to take over areas of influence, and showed documents that proved that. We were on the stage, and I think I mentioned about Jerry Armstrong, who, prior to that in Scientology was a good friend on the ship, and he's a wonderful person regardless, and he's been horribly treated since.
And still is being horribly treated.
Yes, I just found out that Scientology has reinforced the order that he not be allowed to go into United States, and it was granted. I mean, this man has only told the truth about Scientology, and he has been and still is being harassed daily.
Yeah. And he has everything fully documented as to what he's talking about on, he's not a liar.
No, but here's the whole thing about pretty well every ex-Scientologist who speaks out, at least this is from my viewpoint, that we were terrified initially, and we realized that in order to protect ourselves, we had to keep speaking out. And involving the police and every area of influence that we had to make sure that they knew that if something happened to us, it was the Church of Scientology.
Right.
We were flying down.
Let me ask you another question about that, John. You said you were involved. They sued you like 15 times, you and your mother and your family, or whatever. That had to involve tremendous legal costs for you and your family, right?
No, it didn't. Because
it didn't?
Well, we spent on our own different legal fees that weren't directly related to the issue. We asked everybody we talked to for a written statement that they would, if they chose to use our information, that they would defend us in whatever lawsuit came up. And before we talked to them, we obtained their agreement. So basically,
so give an example. You're talking about like the Toronto Police Department, or whatever.
Well, I'm talking about Toronto Sun, the Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, the W5.
Well, you were smart. I was going to say probably cost you and your family a lot of money, but I mean, you were smart.
But it did, because we kept spending our own money, making sure that the whole issue was in the forefront. So it cost, time to, come down to Clearwater, et cetera, et cetera. But
well, let's get back to Clearwater. I want to hear about these hearings. So what happened? What was Gabe Cazares like? What happened in the hearings? Because I don't know anything about these.
Gabe was a wonderful, passionate man, and he realized that these creeps were coming into his town, and he had heard and read about what Scientology does in trying to gain a sphere of influence. And he spoke to us before he asked us to come down to this public meeting. And radio guy Snyder, Dave?
Snyder?
No, Bob.
Bob Snyder? Yes.
Yeah.
Also became involved. And he encouraged us to come down. So this is before the Scientology hearings, when Scientology had not totally
Gone
revealed.
public. Yeah, gone public.
They hadn't revealed that they actually had bought Fort Harrison. It was all United Churches of Florida and etc. So we came down and we told it like we believed and like it was. The fact that, okay, here's what they're doing, and we showed them the policies about establishing a sphere of influence and documented perfectly about the fact that these guys really want to take over your community like they wanted to take over Morocco as a country, for example.
Right.
And there was actually a policy and not a policy. It was an order written by Hubbard to do this, and that was found in the raid. I'm trying to look up what the actual the program was. By the way, when we came down to this to this public opening of trying to tell, we got on the plane. The plane came out to the taxiway, and we were then told, we must proceed back to the terminal. And Mom and I knew what the heck had happened.
Oh, wow.
There was a bomb threat. And
on the plane
that we were
Now, was this in Toronto or coming back from Clearwater?
No,
from Tampa?
leaving Toronto to go to Clearwater,
to Tampa,
to this first public meeting. Okay, they actually phoned in a bomb threat about the plane. The Church of Scientology did it. It was part of the files that were found in the raid, and the phone call was made right outside of the Church of Scientology of Toronto from a phone booth. Okay, so we crazy.
I wonder who did that.
Yeah, so it was crazy because we're scared because, oh my God, you know, here we are going down, and we knew. So we immediately told the stewardess, can we please talk to the flight officer? And we need to talk to the police. And initially, when we talked to them before we were able to get back on the plane, because they took everybody's luggage off and searched it.
Oh, wow.
Because of the bomb threat. So we were delayed, you know, getting down for a period of time. Anyway, they thought we were crazy when we told them the information. And then we asked them to contact our police contact within the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, who were doing investigations then. And, you know, they were assured that, yes, these guys aren't crazy. In all likelihood, it was the Church of Scientology that did this. So the plane was delayed. We almost didn't make it in time to the meeting. And I can't remember what forum it was. There was a stage and a large audience, and most of the audience were anti-Scientologists, but there was a fairly good group of Scientologists that wanted to harass us. Jerry, unfortunately, Armstrong was among them. We talked about that last time, so I won't repeat that.
Were there protesters? Were they outside with signs protesting
while
you guys were there?
Oh, yes. Again, we had to pass by the people with their placards and, you know, liars, non-church, you know, you don't believe in God, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they don't believe in God either, except Hubbard, perhaps. Anyway, so we went there and told it like it was, and we were really well received. Both local papers, you know, latched onto it, And we provided the documents that showed how they do it, when they do it, and this was all under Hubbard's signature. So they couldn't argue what they were doing in Clearwater at the time.
Right. Well,
but they still did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I remember in late 75, early 76, before Hubbard took off to New York, the first time I'd ever seen him do this, he had the Guardian's office, certain executives come over to where we were living at King Arthur's Court, and he did a briefing and talked with them, Jackie Ritchie, Tom Ritchie, later on, Kathy O'Gorman. And after one of those meetings, Hubbard came out and he was chatting about different things he'd learned. And he was talking about Gabe, the mayor, and how the mayor was just a wetback. And I'm like, what's a wetback?
Yeah.
You know, and that was news to me. I'm like, oh, okay. It's someone who swam across the Rio Grande. But they had actually... I didn't know this until later, but the Guardian's office had infiltrated Gabe's office.
Yes.
They had an attorney in there working for him who was actually a Scientologist. And I actually talked to him, maybe 3-4 weeks ago on the phone. Oh. And that was Merrill Veneer. And he wrote this book, Arrows in the Dark. And in here, he talks about the different capers that the Guardian's office did and the criminality and all the stuff going on behind the scenes that innocent Scientologists would have no clue or even think a Scientologist could go that low and do such a thing.
Mom, Nan McLean, blew the whistle on Merrill Veneer.
Oh, okay.
So Gabe...
I mean, she outed him because he still was in Scientology spying?
I'm not sure that he was still in Scientology, but she outed him because he was using all of the Scientology technology to do his work, which showed him to be a Scientologist. Totally. I mean, you can't be a Scientologist doing that kind of thing without giving your identity up.
Right, right.
So, yeah, she blew the whistle on Veneer. And a number of other people. Again, Veneer was part of the group that actually broke into our Clearwater lawyer's office and stole all the documents that.
And he talks about that in his book.
Right. So, I mean, he did what he did. You know, he apologized for it, I believe, at the end of his book. But, you know, he did bad things, much like all of us did, and regret now. But
now, I will say this. So what was the outcome of your hearing? Did you guys finish up and fly back to Canada, or what happened?
We did at the time, but the papers picked up the full backup information that we had as a result of those hearings and printed it all. So there was in the Clearwater Sun, there was a 5-day group of articles that basically blew the whistle on them. And Tampa Bay, was that the Trib? No,
the Tampa Tribune. There's St. Pete Times, but there's also the Tampa Tribune.
Right, but St. Pete Times was at the same time as the
Clearwater Sun.
Yeah. And you know, so they told it like it was, and then basically the crap hit the fan.
And you know something, I mean, you know, Hubbard had already left because of other things that happened, but you helped make it impossible for him to ever return. And to this day, Clearwater is still having to deal with Scientology and them taking over the town. They've bought up over 200 parcels over the last several years. You know, they own big real estate and all that. And you know, thank goodness for Mark Bunker, who's on the city council, and he's running for re-election right now down there, who has spoken out against Scientology for over 20 years. He's about the only person that's carrying the flag down there.
Yes.
I must say, at that time, Hubbard never expected Clearwater to be anything beyond the Fort Harrison and the Clearwater building when it was purchased. He thought that was enough because we'd all been living on this small little ship, and now we've got all this great expansion, and he'd never imagined what it has turned into, in Clearwater. He kind of
Really?
It was like he was going to live in the penthouse, and the staff would live on certain floors, and the public would all be in the cabanas. And he'd never talked.
There was a whole project that he wrote about taking control of Clearwater.
Well, yeah, he wanted to say Clearwater, but yeah.
But that's Clearwater as in the management of Clearwater, the city council.
Right.
Not Clearwater. He wanted the people in Scientology in those two buildings to become a part of the community and not say that they were Scientologists or,
Gotcha.
And just kind of weasel their way into the different boards to protect Scientology once it was established. But his own thought of expansion, we didn't even fill the Fort Harrison when we moved from the ship to the FH. The people had their own individual rooms, and, it wasn't stacked high like it became. And then they ended up having to buy all these other hotels and the Hacienda and the Heart of Clearwater and, the Sandcastle, and the West Coast building. That all became later with the expansion that Hubbard never even conceived.
Since then, however, our dear friend David Miscavige has other ideas.
Right.
Who really wants to take over the entire downtown of Clearwater and totally control it.
It's funny. When I first was going to Clearwater, when I joined the Sea Org in 1976, I'll never forget when I found out, they're down in Clearwater, Florida. And of course, I'm a young Scientologist, 17 years old. I'm thinking, ooh, Clearwater. Oh, yeah, the state of clear in Scientology. And then we're driving down the causeway from Tampa to Clearwater. The causeway. Oh, yeah, we're at Cause. I thought, what did they do? Change the names of all these things?
I never thought of the causeway, but the Clearwater, I remember when I was in briefing to go to Clearwater with Hannah and David and do the space planning. This is before the close of escrow on the buildings. We were talking with Hubbard about how it was such an appropriate name for Scientology to be in Clearwater. And the only reason they purchased in Clearwater was the town was already dead. So there was an empty hotel in the bank building. But part of the mission was to find a hotel that was in a town with an international airport.
Right.
Oh,
and it was reported Tampa was an international airport. And once we arrived, and Hubbard's finding out there's no direct flights from Europe or anything, he's like, "Wait a minute! I was told this was an international airport. It had one flight a week from Mexico."
Oh my goodness! Wow. Well, Lisa McPherson, on the early days, wrote a huge amount of what really happened in the history of Clearwater as well, and I think it was in '75.
Lisa McPherson. No, you're not Lisa McPherson. She's the one who died in the late 90s.
Excuse me, not Lisa McPherson then. She is the one that passed away. Oh, doesn't matter.
How did she know about this?
Well,
she wasn't even to Scientology then. Yeah.
Right. No, my mistake.
That's okay.
Lisa, someone wrote something. I'll have to look it up again. I believe we may have one other short discussion again after this one, perhaps. because there's still other stuff about really the bad things these guys did,
I understand.
still do, and the policy is there. It's there, and Miscavige is a horrible man, obviously,
Yeah.
and people are stupid to follow him. Anybody that would stay in the RPF, Mark, you were in the RPF, weren't you?
Yeah. 1982, 83. Yeah.
Did you willingly stay there?
At first, it's always a moment of truth moment. When I went and I was shipped out to PAC, I was in complete disagreement with what was being done, and that's why I got sent. I was disaffected, quote unquote, and I seriously thought I need to get out of here. And I was in PAC in the big blue building, and I'm thinking, how can I get out of here? And I'm thinking, where would I go? You actually have doubts. And then I started getting handling, I got assigned a twin, somebody I had to take care responsibility for. And all of a sudden those feelings just went away again. And I stayed back in it,
Well,
I went to the RPF, John.
I didn't know that, Janis.
Yes. I actually was assigned as a List 1 RSer in 70. In 78. And I fought it and ended up being locked up for 11 days. And we did a video on it because my one of the security guards blew while he was supposed to be guarding me.
Wow.
And RSer means rock slammer, and that's where Janis gets the term rock slam those likes, everybody.
Right. But I was 21 years old at the time. My mom had passed away, and I'm like, well, where do I go? But I kept wanting to leave, and no one would let me. And then I got a letter from Mary Sue that talked me into staying. And then I joined the RPF, and you still get those thoughts, but I'm like, I'm now under guard. I'm with all these people. And then your whole frame of mind switches again.
You get into a routine.
You get into a routine, and you get close, and these are good friends. Yeah. You've got good friends, and okay, let me get through this.
Yeah.
That's part of the whole gig, I guess, about the RPF or anything in Scientology. You've got such good friends who really have great intentions, who don't know diddly about what's happening.
Right.
And, the bulk of the people that went to the Austin opening don't have a clue of the reality of it. And it's not their fault.
Exactly. Yeah, because you don't know what the Office of Special Affairs is doing or anything like that. It's a need to know basis, and you don't need to know.
Well, Mark, I mean, you were there. You were in the highest echelon after the Apollo was over with. That whole era was over.
Yeah. After doing the RPF.
And you worked for Miscavige, though.
Yeah.
And
because my goal was, I was a true believer. You know how it is. I was a true believer. I wanted to, go. I believed in the bridge. I believed in going up, becoming an operating Thetan and all that. And I believed that I was helping mankind, and that was the greatest good. And that's what I believed, and it wasn't until I started seeing Miscavige abusing people, and then I started to be abused. That's when I turned on it, and it was hard. Janis, we left at the same time without even talking to each other because we saw what was going on. And, we stupidly thought, L. Ron Hubbard's going to come back and he'll straighten this out. We'll just leave for a while, but that's what we believed in that time, and we were wrong.
Being wrong isn't that bad.
No, I
sometimes it makes you right.
It's cathartic when you can say, oh, I was wrong, or I was duped, like my mother finally said after so many years. And, for the most part, all of those people that are still in, unless they're exposed to the things both you, Janis, and Mark were exposed to, and myself only to an original minimal extent. I'm glad I got out so early, and I wish more people that I knew had been able to get out. Some are still in. And
Yeah.
we were lucky we got out. I was 32. Janice, you probably were, what, 34? I mean, we still were young
30
enough
I
to have
was
our own
30
life outside.
Yeah, I
Outside
was
of Scientology.
34.
Janice started a family. We had our own businesses, so we were lucky.
Yeah, I like to say I was 34, barefoot and pregnant.
But you have not only a wonderful family of your own, but wonderful grandchildren that I see on your post all the time.
Isn't she adorable? You know what? It was so cute. I got a poster. We took her horse riding on my horse, and she can now get the horse to go forward. She can get it to stop, and she can get it to back up. So wow. At 4 years old, she's doing really good.
Yeah. Well,
all right, listen. Go ahead, John. I was just going to say we've reached the end, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying we've got to go now. I may have enough stuff to do one more if you guys are interested.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love talking.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking with you, John.
But I want to reinforce to everybody that watches, the people that are in, they only know so much. It's not their fault as to what the other horrible people, and there are lots of them, are doing within Church of Scientology. And those people are doing it knowingly, willingly, and they're following Hubbard's horrible policies that say, you know, we can trick, sue, lie to, and destroy anybody. And they're still doing it. But
that's right.
The bulk.
But you know what? Those people are they're the same as what I was. I would read that, and it wouldn't even click to me that that's what he really meant. I would justify it. You know, well, oh yeah, that's what he's just writing, you know. But it's only once you leave you realize, oh my God, they really were doing this. Yeah. And he was serious about it.
Yeah.
You know, but when you're in there, it doesn't click.
No, it doesn't.
All right. Well, anyway, I want to thank John for this great episode. If you enjoyed this and some of our other videos, please subscribe to our channel. Just hit that subscribe button. Janice likes to say, rock slam the like button. That definitely helps.
Yes.
Doing this helps us get these videos out to other people who have nothing to do with Scientology. The YouTube algorithm grabs it and pushes it out to other people who then find out about these things and hopefully can help us make some changes. So anyway, please subscribe to the channel. We would really appreciate it. If you've got any questions or comments about anything we've talked about, please go down in the comment section and write any questions. We check it all the time, and we will definitely answer it. And then also, if you're interested in donating to our channel, you can always buy us a coffee. There's a link down below in the description. Just click on it, and you can follow the instructions, and you can donate to our channel. And the money we get really goes back into the channel. So anyway, we just wanted to mention that too. Finally, I wanted to mention Janice's book. She has two of them. Commoner's Messenger Book 1. That's Janis with L. Ron Hubbard on the flagship Apollo. And this is Commoner's Messenger Book 2, and there's Janis with L. Ron Hubbard. And they're great stories. They're filled with photographs and all that. And you can get autographed copies of these books. Just go down below to our shop, and they're tagged. And Janis will autograph them, and we can ship them off to you in the United States. In the non-U.S., if you pay extra, there's a way to donate. We can ship to different areas and stuff. So anyway, but if you're interested in more details and photographs and all that, go ahead, please order our books. And
I want to jump in before you say goodbye.
Go ahead, John. I got Misha Bar.
Janis's books are the most honest take and reality of what occurred on the Apollo and with L. Ron Hubbard, and no one can ever take that away from you, Janis. And
thank you.
You've done a great job, and I'm really waiting for the third book.
Well, good. I haven't touched. I've got 4 chapters done on the third book. I've got to confront it and get it done, but I keep letting other things in life get in the way.
Well,
but I'll do it. Yeah. You know, I sold a book the other day because someone heard you pitching my book. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'll pitch it anywhere, anytime.
Anyway, you hear Misha's, demanding my attention, and we've enjoyed this show, but I just wanted to say, until the next time, everybody, we appreciate you watching, and bye-bye. We'll see you later.
Take care.